Hi, I'm Kat and welcome to the Halloween series. I have to say that I'm really freezing cold here, seriously. Oh, I should turn on my heating, but saving money, right? Yeah. Okay. So today we have, of course, another Halloween themed video for you. Now, I'm going to say this from the beginning. I'm not a believer at all in supernatural or ghosts or spirit hauntings, nothing like that. But anyway, because it's the Halloween month, I want to tell you a story which a lot of people say is very much real. Do I believe it? I don't know, but let's see if you believe it. This real house at 284 Green Street was once known as the House of Strange Happenings. And then it went on the big screen. The Conjuring 2 focuses on one of the most famous supernatural cases in history, the Enfield Poltergeist. The story of a young girl believed to be possessed by a demon inside her London home. This captivated the whole nation, and I myself watched The Conjuring, The Conjuring 2, The Exorcist, and all I'm gonna say is this: I'll never ever in my life watch this kind of movies or series or films or whatever again. Never. It completely freaked me out, and it completely freaks me out, seriously. I mean, even doing my research for this video and seeing all the photos and things, I was really struggling. So let's talk about the Enfield Poltergeist. 47-year-old Peggy Hodgson was a single mother to 4 children: 12-year-old Margaret, 11-year-old Janet, 10-year-old Johnny, and 7-year-old Billy. Peggy had divorced the children's father after he got involved with a younger woman. Now my hair is going to be all static. I am sure, yes, it's going to be all over the place. Heat and warmth over everything else. On the evening of Tuesday, 30th of August, 1977, Peggy went into her children's bedroom to tell them to just stop fighting and go to sleep. Thinking nothing of it, she then went to sleep herself. The next night, she heard a shuffling noise, like someone walking on the linoleum in slippers, and she then heard 4 loud knocks. When she went to tell her daughters, Margaret and Janet, to just settle down and go to sleep, Peggy found them hiding in the corner with terrified expressions on their faces. The girls told their mom that the chest of drawers was moving toward the bedroom door, but Peggy told them to stop acting silly and just to go to sleep. But Peggy then witnessed the drawers moving herself, so she saw the drawers moving in the direction of the door by an invisible force, almost as if some supernatural presence was trying to trap the girls in the room. And when she went to try and push back against the dresser, it wouldn't budge. It just wouldn't budge. It seemed as if she's trying to push it back and something is pushing it against her. Terrified, Peggy and her kids ran to their neighbor's house across the street, the Nottinghams, who lived at 282 Green Street, and they asked for help. Vic Nottingham, a roofer, and his son Gary went over to Peggy's house to investigate, and they also heard knocks coming from all over the house. Thinking that someone was probably playing a prank, they called the police, who came out to the house at 1 a.m. that night. The police checked the walls, the loft, and even the pipes, but they could find nothing to explain the tapping. One of the police officers said that all the constables and neighbors went into the kitchen to check the fridge pipes, leaving only one of the police officers in the living room. The lights in the living room were switched off again, and within a couple of minutes, Peggy's eldest son pointed to a chair next to the sofa. The officer looked at the chair and saw it wobbling from side to side, then saw the chair slide across the floor towards the kitchen wall. That chair moved approximately 3 to 4 feet, and then it just stopped. She inspected the chair for hidden wires, but the police officer couldn't find any explanation for what she's just seen. Even though the officer claimed to see the chair move across the room, the police deduced that this was not a police matter. The next night, Peggy's neighbor Vic went back to the house where he was attacked with flying Lego. Marbles and Lego flew around the house for the next 3 days, and quite a few people visited the house trying to help, including members of the council and clergy. Nobody knowing what to do, on September the 4th, Mrs. Nottingham, the neighbor, called the Daily Mirror, hoping that they could do something to help. The Mirror sent reporter Douglas Banks and photographer Graham Morris. Graham Morris later said that he believed it was just an ordinary job until he stepped foot into the house. He stood in the kitchen as the children were brought into the adults' arms. The last one to come in was Janet. As soon as she went into that kitchen, things just took off and started flying around the room. Graham got hit by a Lego brick on his right eye. He even got a lamp for a couple of days, so it was quite a bit of force. Marbles and things left in the kitchen were just flying around the room. Graham was watching all of the family, but none of them did anything to cause this. George Fellows, a senior reporter at the Mirror, and photographer David Thorpe also visited the house. George first believed that Peggy was playing some kind of tricks so she could get a new council house, but he soon realized that something serious was happening there. The atmosphere at the house and in the neighborhood was quite mixed, ranging from hysteria to excitement, terror, tension, and all sorts. The reporters and investigators from the Daily Mirror worked quite hard to eliminate the possibility of total trickery, and in George's opinion, this type of phenomena could only be faked by an expert. George suggested contacting the Society for Psychical Research, SPR. He was put in contact with Maurice Gross, a fairly new member of the society who had joined after the death of his daughter the year before. Maurice visited the house on the 5th of September. He said that on his first visit he found chaos. The whole family was congregated in the house together with the neighbors next door, and there were a lot of really scared people there. Maurice and the members of the press waited to witness any incidents, and on Wednesday the 8th of September at 1:15 a.m. they rushed into the children's bedroom after hearing a loud crash. The two sisters, Janet and Margaret, were still asleep, but a chair flipped over and moved a meter across the room. This was enough to convince Maurice to stay and do some more investigating. During his stay at the house, Maurice said that he witnessed more than 2,000 different incidents of supernatural activity. On the 10th of September, the Daily Mirror broke the story, describing it as the House of Strange Happenings. Later that evening, Peggy appeared on a radio program called Nightline on LBC, a London radio station. When Peggy arrived home after the show, she was greeted by the BBC's Ross Morris from the Radio 4 show, The World This Weekend. Ross Morris joined Maurice Gross on an all-night vigil and also witnessed some paranormal activity. After the girls went to bed, there was a very loud crash upstairs in their bedroom. Something had chucked the chair across the room. Maurice also saw flying marbles, jumping teaspoons and boxes, and a sofa that rose into the air and crashed down on the floor upside down. He was among several people to witness these events. Other witnesses included the reporters and next-door neighbors. Maurice and the photographer quickly set up a camera that took photos when triggered and managed to capture Janet being thrown from her bed. Realizing that he was out of his depth, Maurice asked the SPR for help in investigating the poltergeist. Guy Playfair accepted the request and arrived at the house on the 12th of September. He later wrote the book This House is Haunted, the true story of the Enfield Poltergeist. The family was chased out of the house on Sunday the 25th of September and found refuge with Peggy's brother who lived up the road. While his wife Sylvia made some tea, a Lego brick appeared in front of her and dropped onto the table. It was then that the family realized the entity could follow them out of the house. Maurice Gross and Guy Playfair saw indentations in pillows and on the bed as if someone was lying there. There was a suspicion that the spirit of a 4-year-old child who had been smothered with a pillow by her father may be responsible for the incidents. Peggy had been given items of furniture from the house of the little girl when she moved into her property in Enfield. Peggy made sure to throw out any furniture belonging to the little girl's former house, but even this wasn't enough. The activity still continued. Janet, the 11-year-old girl, was the center of the activity, which is common in poltergeist cases as they predominantly affect girls and young women. Two physicists, Piero Brovetto and Vera Maxia, who wrote a paper called Some Conjectures about the Mechanism of Poltergeist Phenomenon, argued that children generate poltergeist activity by channeling energy into the quantum mechanical vacuum. Their paper suggests that although poltergeist activity has been reported around the world and in different cultures, the one thing they all have in common is pubescent children or young women. The two physicists believe that during puberty a modification of the body happens which involves various organs, and these changes create fluctuations in electron activity that can cause disturbances up to a few meters around the outside of the brain. They believe that the extra fluctuations triggered by the pubescent brain can enhance virtual particles around the person, which increase the air pressure surrounding them, which could be responsible for moving objects. The word poltergeist is derived from the German words poltern, which means to crash or bang about, and geist, which means mind, ghost or spirit, and the earliest reports of poltergeist activity date back to AD 530. A study of 500 cases carried out by parapsychologists Alan Gold and Tony Cornell found that poltergeist activity involved the movement of small objects to 64%, followed by rapping sounds 48%, and the movement of large objects such as tables and chairs 36%. Many of the witnesses to the haunting in Peggy's house described hearing hollow knocks that were coming from all parts of the house. What separates a poltergeist knock from a human one is the difference in acoustic sound waves. When a human knocks on a surface, there is a full amplitude of sound which tapers off. A poltergeist rap starts quietly before becoming louder and then fading away in a similar waveform to an earthquake. According to Dr. Barry Colvin, a polyurethane technologist who carries out experimental psychical research, poltergeist sound signatures cannot be reproduced. The Hodgson house was not a happy house when the activity started, and it's commonly believed that poltergeist activity tends to start after major trauma or life event. In the case of the Hodgsons, their father abandoned them for a younger woman, and the family were left struggling in poverty. The two girls, Margaret and Janet, didn't have a good relationship with their father, and they were actually afraid of him. The youngest child, Billy, wasn't with the family because of behavioral problems, and he was in a boarding school. Just before the whole activity flared up at the house, Janet had been playing with an Ouija board with her sister Margaret. William Roll, a parapsychologist who studied many US poltergeist events, noticed a tendency for the person at the center of activity to exhibit symptoms of repressed anger or distress. He believed that the haunting was due to the discharge of mental energy he called recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, or RSPK. He theorized that the person was involuntarily employing RSPK in order to let out their repressed feelings. This certainly seemed to be the case with Janet, who had a tendency to swear a lot and displayed increasingly aggressive behavior during the haunting. She would suddenly rush across the room and bash her head on the wall, and her family became concerned that she would kill herself. She would have fits of rage where she would shout and swear and would have to be physically restrained. Towards the end of November, a doctor was called to the house and he administered 10 milligrams of Valium in order to relax her. After being sedated, Janet levitated and landed on a radio where she was discovered by John, Peggy's brother. Janet wasn't the only person affected by the poltergeist. Her mother claimed to know when events were about to take place, as she would get a headache, and Margaret at one point shared the same dreams. However, the activity always followed Janet. Manifestations started to appear, and the neighbor's brother saw a light about a foot tall, burning in the Hodgson's window before fading away. Another neighbor and Peggy saw the same elderly woman in different windows independently of each other. Janet's brother Johnny saw an old man with big teeth staring at him. All in all, it was believed that around 15 different people saw some kind of supernatural entity during the haunting. A physicist called John Hasted, who strapped Janet to a Blundell couch, which is an apparatus used to measure such anomalies, found that her weight increased in a way that couldn't be explained. He also observed a light bulb explode, which he considered a similar unexplainable incident. Another physicist called David Robertson attempted to secretly video Janet but found it impossible to conceal the equipment. He saw several unexplainable incidents, however, such as a sideboard overturning, Janet levitating, and the cushion being transported to the roof, among other things. Although the council would not rehouse the family, they did agree to send them away for a week-long break during half-term. They went to Clacton-on-Sea, and the only incident that happened there was the sound of a dog barking from Janet's bed. On November the 5th, when the Hodgsons returned from their holiday, Maurice Gross decided to communicate with the spirit using raps, 1 for no and 2 for yes. He asked some questions. Are you a male spirit? Did you used to live in this house? Was it more than 50 years ago? Did you die in this house? Are you unhappy? Why are you here? Is it because you want to give us a special message? Are you having a game with me? The spirit then threw a cardboard box and pillow at Maurice Gross's face. On Monday, the 10th of November, which was Janet's 12th birthday, Guy Playfair invited an Argentinian psychic called Eduardo Balanovsky to visit. He brought a magnetometer, which they used to look for anomalies in the electric magnetic field around the house. During his visit, Janet's pillow was thrown around and the machines registered a change in electric magnetic field strength. On the 12th of November, Janet, on the advice of the psychic, left pens and paper around the house and called out to the entity to leave her a message, after which messages started appearing around the house. Peggy found one on the fridge that said, "I will stay in this house, do not read this to anyone or I will retaliate." The next message, which was found on the living room table, said, "Can I have a tea bag?" Peggy placed a tea bag on the table and the ripped tea bag manifested next to it. Peggy's ex, remember her ex-husband that he left her for a younger woman, he turned up at the house and she showed him the messages. Once he had gone, Peggy apologized to the entity for showing him the messages, and another one appeared saying, "It was a misunderstanding, don't do it again, I know who that was." The writing was very similar to Janet's. On Tuesday, the 29th of November, the first medium, a Brazilian psychic called Luis Gasparetto, visited the family. He was accompanied by his interpreter, Elsie Dubrasa, who was a member of the healing department of Sao Paulo State Spiritist Federation. They offered some spiritual healing to the family, which gave some comfort. Louise would go into a trance-like state and produce drawings and paintings, and after they left, Janet began creating disturbing, bloody pictures whilst in a trance. She also wrote the name Watson over and over and over on a page. It turned out that a family called Watson had lived in the house and the wife had died of a tumor in her throat in a similar way to one of the bloody pictures Janet had drawn. On Saturday, 3rd of December, Janet was pulled out of her bed and Maurice found her sliding down the stairs head first while she was still asleep. A couple of days later, another member of the SPR joined the team, a student physicist called David Roberts. More members of the SPR joined them on the 10th of December, Dr. John Beloff and Anita Gregory. The group challenged the entity to speak, and after some whistles and barking, a strong voice calling himself Joe Watson began to speak. However, the next night, the voice said that his name was Bill Wilkins, and on Tuesday, 13th of December, Maurice Gross's son Richard, who was a newly qualified solicitor, helped his father interrogate the presence. The spirit responded with banging in response to questions, but a man's voice was soon heard, coming from somewhere behind Janet's neck. The voice identified itself as Bill Wilkins, who had died in the house at the age of 72. Richard asked him how he died, and he said,
"Let me hear you say my name. Come on, let me hear you say my name." That's not my name. Come on, my name's Morris. Let me hear you say it. Morris. Say Dr. Belloc. Come on, let me hear you say that. Come on, let's hear you say Dr. Belloc. Could you close that door down? Say Dr. Belloc. What is it? Come, if you squeak the bed, I can't hear you talking. Now, say Dr. Belloc. Come on. Come on, say it for me, Dr. Belloc. Dr. Belloc.
Right, that's good. Quiet. Shut up your door. I'm 72 years old. I come from Jewel Park graveyard. And I have right near the church where Rena lives. And all my friends come from there as well. And we all make a game and go to the pub. And then we pick your house. Because I used to live here. And I will tell you some more. And if you don't get anyone else, just set Mr. Hook and Mr. Playback.
I want you to tell me whether you remember what happened to you when you died. Just before you died and just after you died.
Days before I died, I went blind. Then I had an hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs.
Bill, if you're there, would you answer me the following question? What have you done with Denise's 30p?
Headed down to the radio, downstairs.
Sorry, Bill, can you say that again, please?
Headed down to the radio, downstairs.
Righto, Bill, I'll go and look. Thanks ever so much. Why can't Janet feel you?
I'm invisible.
You're invisible? Why are you invisible?
So I'm a G-H-O-S-T.
Did any friends go with you?
Yes, all of them. All the dogs, 68 dogs.
And what have you got 68 dogs for?
So that they can protect me from you killing me. They can bite your head off.
How can we kill you, Bill?
You can shoot me off.
Now how can we shoot you if we can't see you, Bill?
By praying to God.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Bill.
By praying to God.
By praying to God. So, what you're saying is we could get rid of you by praying to God.
Yes.
I went blind. I had a hemorrhage. I fell asleep and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs. Bill's son Terry later confirmed that this was indeed how his father had died. When Guy Playfair asked why he was invisible, Bill said, "I'm invisible because I'm a ghost." To rule out the possibility of Janet faking the voice, Maurice Gross taped up her mouth, but the voice still continued. He then asked Janet to hold water in her mouth, which she did, but the voice could still be heard talking. Maurice recorded hours of the voice by using a contact microphone placed on the back of Janet's head. A speech therapist who examined Janet said that they couldn't be certain where the voice was coming from, but it sounded similar to a false vocal cord tone. There is a voice effect known as plica ventricularis, which is where muscle tension behind the throat can produce sounds independent of vocal cords. However, using this muscle tension to speak often results in an extremely sore throat and can do some serious damage, none of which happened to Janet, who would speak for up to 3 hours. Since no cause could be found, it was concluded that something was using Janet as an amplifier. Maurice Gross and Guy Playfair decided to hypnotize Janet and called in Dr. Ian Fletcher, who was a hypnotist, surgeon and member of the Magic Circle. Ian put Janet into a light state of hypnosis and asked her some questions. "Do you know who is doing all this?" "Me and my sister," she replied. "Why do you think you are to blame?" "I don't know who is." "What does it feel like?" "Cold hands gripping me around my body." "Who started the trouble?" "None of us." "What is the cause of the trouble?" "An increase in unhappiness." Ian Fletcher later said that he formed the impression this was not fraud. Janet and her sister were doing some of these things, maybe springing out of bed. Something is forcing them to do it against their will. 2 SPR experts caught the children bending spoon themselves and questioned why no one was allowed in the same room as Janet when she was using her gruff voice, apparently that of Bill Wilkins. Janet she admitted that they fabricated some of the events once or twice. They faked phenomena just to see if Maurice and Guy would catch them, and they always did. But according to Janet, they only faked about 2% of the phenomena. It was soon after Janet was hypnotized that she began levitating. On Thursday, 15th of December at 11:45 a.m., Hazel Short, the local lollipop lady, witnessed Janet floating around her room. She said that she was just standing there looking at the house when all of a sudden a few books went flying across and hit the window. She heard the noise because it was really quiet, there was no traffic, and it even made her jump. Then, after some time, she saw Janet. She didn't know if there was a bed under that window, but she saw Janet going up and down as if someone got hold of her legs and was throwing her up and down. She saw Janet coming up to about the window's height, but Hazel assumed that Janet was bouncing, but if she would be bouncing from her feet, she wouldn't be able to get enough power to bounce off her back to go up that high. Hazel's friend could also see her do that. On Friday, 23rd of December, the family goldfish died, and Bill, the ghost, admitted that he electrocuted the fish in their tank using spirit energy. On Christmas Day, the pet parakeet was found dead in its cage, and later that day, Janet was found with a curtain wrapped around her neck. Peggy managed to untangle her, saving her from suffocating. Janet later complained that a knife was following her around upstairs, and Peggy found one of the knives she had just put away on the stairs. Janet later said that she was used and used. There was levitation, there were the voices, the curtain wrapped itself around her neck, and she realized it could have killed her. Because of all the attention the family was getting, Janet was bullied at school. They even called her Ghost Girl and put crane flies down her back. She would dread going home. The front door would be open with lots of people in and out of the house. She never knew what to expect, and she was really worried about her mom, Peggy. Janet herself was on the front page of the Daily Star with a headline, "Possessed by the Devil." The kids didn't have a normal childhood. Peggy felt that people were walking over her. She felt exploited. On Sunday, the 15th of January, which was Peggy's birthday, some writing in fecal matter appeared on the wall. This was followed by a few days of puddles of diarrhea. This was sent for testing at a lab and came back as cat urine. Peggy also saw a man from the waist down walking up her stairs. A few days later, "I am Fred" was found on the bathroom door, written with electrical tape. Janet said that she was unaware that she went into trances until she was shown pictures. She was really distressed by the photos and she was very upset. She knew that the voices were happening and she would feel like something was behind her all the time. She had a short stay in the Maudsley Psychiatric Hospital in London, where they stuck electrodes on her head, but the tests came back normal. The levitation for Janet was scary because she didn't know where she was going to land. When the curtain wrapped around her neck, she started screaming. She was terrified. She really thought that she was going to die. Her mom had to use all her strength to rip that curtain away. The man who spoke through her, Bill, he seemed quite angry that they were in his house. Many people witnessed paranormal events over the 19 months of the poltergeist activity, but several experiments confirmed that eyewitness testimony can be unreliable, as observers often see what they expect to see. Dingwall, Goldney and Hall, who worked on the Borley Rectory case in 1956, argued that the influence of suggestion played a large part in what people saw or heard. Once in the mind of the affected, belief can be strengthened and simple events misinterpreted in order to fit them into the desired pattern. This is confirmation bias, which is the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of existing beliefs or theories. Confirmation bias, alongside poor memory and consensus reporting, mean that strong evidence is needed alongside witness testimony. On May the 16th, the SPR formed a committee in order to carry out their own investigation. The committee interviewed the witnesses, which they found convincing. They also consulted Charles Moses, an experienced investigator from the Southern California Society for Psychical Research. The committee found that there was good evidence for paranormal phenomena as described by the various witnesses. However, they were reluctant to give credibility to the voice of Bill Watkins. On 25th of July, the family sent Janet to the Maudsley Hospital, which is a psychiatric hospital in South London, and the incidents died down, even though the family still saw figures. Janet underwent extensive physical and psychological assessment at the Institute of Neuropsychiatry under Dr. Peter Fenwick, and nothing was found to be wrong with her, including brain damage or epilepsy. Janet returned on the 1st of September after being away for nearly 6 weeks, and within half an hour she saw the figure of a little boy. On Monday 2nd of October they called in another medium, a Dutchman named Dono Mailing, who came to the house and traveled along the astral plane. He was certain that a 24-year-old woman was involved in the case. Maurice Gross had had a daughter called Janet who died in a crash, aged 24, and it was this that led him to become a member of the SPR. After Dono identified the 24-year-old woman, the incidents tapered off and then stopped. Janet said that it was a priest's visit to Green Street that resulted in the incidents quieting down in autumn 1978, although the incidents didn't stop entirely, with her mother continuing to hear noises in the house. Maurice Gross remained in contact with the family until his death at age 87 in 2006. He spent much of his time towards the end of his life defending his investigation of the haunting. Guy Playfair remains an active author, researcher, and member of the SPR Council. Peggy Hodgson remained in the house until her death in 2003. Janet left home at 16 and she married early. Janet lost touch with everything, all the coverage of the case in paranormal books. Shortly after the press attention drifted away, Janet's younger brother Johnny died of cancer, aged just 14 years old. Janet's mother then developed breast cancer, dying in 2003, and Janet suffered the loss of her own son in his sleep when he was 18 years old. Janet's brother, until the day he left that house after Peggy had died, would say there's still something there. You'd feel like you were being watched. Both Janet and Margaret have made several TV appearances in the following years where they continue to insist on the authenticity of their experiences. Janet describes the poltergeist activity as traumatic. It was an extraordinary case. It's one of the most recognized cases of paranormal activity in the world. But for me, it was quite daunting. I think it really left its mark. The activities, the newspaper attention, the different people in and out of the house. It wasn't a normal childhood. Janet rejects any suggestion that the whole story was faked in pursuit of fame or money. She didn't want to bring it up again while her mom was still alive, but after Peggy passed away, she wanted to tell her story, even though people believe her or they don't. She says she was the one who went through this and it was true. Asked whether she believes the house is still haunted, she says, years later, when Mom was alive, there was always a presence there, something watching over you. As long as people don't meddle the way we did with Ouija boards, it's quite settled. It's a lot calmer than when I was a child. It is at rest, but will always be there. Janet said she continues to believe in the poltergeist, saying, "It lived off me, off my energy. Call me mad if you like. Those events did happen. The poltergeist was with me, and I feel that in a sense he always will be." Janet lives in Essex with her husband, a retired milkman. After Peggy Hodgson died, Claire Bennett and her 4 sons moved into the house. Claire said she didn't see anything, but she felt uncomfortable. There was definitely some kind of presence in the house. She always felt like someone was looking at her. Her sons would wake up in the night hearing people talking downstairs. Claire then found out about the house's history. Suddenly, it all made sense. They moved out after just 2 months. One of her sons, 15-year-old Sheka, said, "The night before we moved out, I woke up and saw a man come into the room. I ran into Mom's room and said, 'We've got to move,' and we did the next day." The house is currently occupied by another family who don't want to be identified. The mother says simply, "I've got children, they don't know about it. I don't want to scare them." The Enfield Poltergeist has continued to fascinate and several films been made based on the events. Steven Spielberg's 1982 film Poltergeist was loosely based on what happened. In 1992, a BBC mockumentary called Ghost Watch, starring Sarah Green and Michael Parkinson, featured identical paranormal incidents. In 2015, there was a 3-part series called The Enfield Haunting, starring Timothy Spall and Juliet Stevenson. In 2016, The Conjuring 2 was made, which featured 2 American paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren, who visited the house in May 1978. And with this we got to the end of today's Halloween story. Please do let me know, guys, what do you think in the comment section down below. Do you really believe that there was all this levitating and haunting and throwing of objects and a poltergeist in the Enfield house? Thank you so much for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.